The smell hit me before anything else. Gardenias? My niece always wore too much of that perfume. The kind that clings to furniture for days after she leaves. I was lying in bed, eyes closed, listening. 63 years of living alone will teach you the difference between a house settling and a person trying not to be heard. The footsteps were soft, deliberate, pausing near the dresser, then moving toward the closet. I had left the fireproof box on the shelf, unlocked, on purpose. I waited. 7 months earlier, I drove myself to the ER at 2 in the morning because my left arm had gone numb and I couldn't remember what month it was. The doctor used the word episode. A small one, he said, like that made it better. No lasting damage, he said, like I was supposed to feel grateful. I sat in that hospital bed alone for 6 hours before I called anyone. I called my niece, Sylvia. She was there within 40 minutes, mascara slightly smeared, hair still in a braid from sleeping. She held my hand and said, "Aunt Lois, you cannot keep living alone in that house." She said it like a fact, not a question. And somewhere between the IV drip and the discharge paperwork, I agreed with her. My own house had been paid off since 2009. 31 years of teaching middle school English in Dayton, Ohio, a pension, Social Security, and enough sense to never carry a credit card balance. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. I had a small savings account, a checking account I managed carefully, and a fireproof box in my closet where I kept my important documents. My will, my insurance cards, the deed to the house, and an envelope with $3,200 in cash I'd set aside for a trip to Ireland I kept promising myself. Sylvia lived 40 minutes away in Columbus with her husband, Derek, and their 2 kids. They had a finished basement, guest bedroom, a washer-dryer on the same floor. She said I could stay as long as I needed. She said it was no trouble at all. I rented out my house to a young couple, a teacher and a nurse, for $1,150 a month. I kept that money separate, a buffer I didn't talk about. I paid Sylvia $600 a month toward utilities, bought my own groceries, and tried very hard not to be a burden. For the first 5 or 6 weeks, it worked. Sylvia brought me tea in the mornings. Derek was quiet but polite. The kids, Marcus, 9, and Lily, 6, were loud and sweet, the way kids are when they don't know they're supposed to be on their best behavior around company. I read to them before bed. I helped with homework. I made a chicken noodle soup from scratch on a Sunday that Derek said was the best he'd ever had. Then things shifted. It happened gradually, the way water damage does, invisible until suddenly the wall is soft. Sylvia started making small comments. Nothing direct. She'd walk past the bathroom after I'd showered and say, lightly, "I always forget how long it takes the water to get hot again on this floor." She'd open the refrigerator and sigh quietly to herself while looking at the shelf where I kept my groceries. One night at dinner, she mentioned, while staring at her plate, that electricity bills had really jumped this winter. I offered to pay more. She said no, absolutely not, don't be silly. But she said it quickly, the way people say no when they mean not in so many words. I told myself I was being sensitive. Old habit. 30 years of a classroom teaches you to read a room maybe too well. But then other things started. My reading glasses, the backup pair I kept on the nightstand, disappeared. I looked for 2 weeks before buying a new pair. The original pair turned up in Sylvia's makeup drawer, which I only saw because she'd left it open while I was walking past. She said she must have picked them up thinking they were hers. Her glasses were a completely different frame, tortoiseshell cat eye. Mine were simple, wire-rimmed ovals. I said nothing. The cash envelope in the fireproof box started to feel lighter. I hadn't touched it in weeks, but one afternoon, I counted it while Sylvia and Derek had taken the kids to a birthday party. $300 was missing. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, holding those bills, counting and recounting like maybe I'd made a mistake. I hadn't made a mistake. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I took a piece of thin paper, a receipt from the pharmacy, and folded it exactly once and tucked it behind the remaining bills near the bottom of the envelope. A tell. Something only I would know was there. 2 weeks later, I checked. The paper was still there, but folded differently. Someone had moved the money, put it back, or rearranged it. I started writing things down in a small green spiral notebook I bought at the Dollar General on a Tuesday, told no one about, and kept inside a zippered pocket in my winter coat in the back of the closet. March 4th. Glasses taken. March 17. Cash envelope disturbed. March 22. My good cardigan missing from the hook behind my door. The cardigan was burgundy. I'd had it for 11 years. Sylvia started wearing it in April. When I mentioned I'd been looking for it, she said, "Oh, I thought it was in a donate pile. I'll give it back." She never gave it back. By May, I had 4 pages of notes. I didn't bring any of it to Derek. He worked long hours in insurance claims and came home hollowed out. On the weekends, he watched sports and was kind to me in the absent way of someone who isn't really paying attention. I think he genuinely had no idea. But Sylvia knew what she was doing. I could see it in the way she watched me when I came out of my room. Measuring. Calculating whether I'd noticed, whether I'd say something. The one time I tried, carefully, without accusation, I mentioned the glasses and said gently that I'd found them in her drawer, and could she just let me know in the future if she borrowed something. She stared at me for a long moment, then said, "Aunt Lois, I know this is a hard adjustment, living with family when you're used to your own space. I've read that memory issues can start this way. Little confusions. Have you mentioned it to your doctor?" I said I would. I went to my room and sat on the edge of the bed and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not sadness. Something quieter than sadness. Recognition. She was going to rewrite my memory before I could document hers. That was the week I stopped being passive about it. I transferred $1,800 from my savings into a new account at a different bank, a credit union on the other side of Columbus, and told no one. I called my attorney, a woman named Ellen I'd used for my will and the house deed, and made an appointment to review some documents. I didn't tell Sylvia I was going. I said I had a follow-up appointment with my cardiologist. Ellen reviewed the documents and noticed something I had missed. The beneficiary designation on one of my old life insurance policies, a policy I'd had since 1998 and hadn't thought about in years, had been updated. The change form was dated 9 months ago, filed directly with the insurance company, and listed Sylvia as primary beneficiary instead of my brother Gerald in Florida. I had not signed that form. My signature was on it, but I had not signed it. I sat in Ellen's office for a long time. She sat across from me and said nothing, which is the right thing to do when someone is understanding something painful. Then she said, "Lois, I need you to think about what else might have been accessed. Bank statements, the deed, your social security card." I thought about the fireproof box. Unlocked on that shelf? How easy it would be for someone in the house during the day while I was out walking or napping to photograph a document. A signature. I drove home that evening with my hand steady on the wheel and a plan already forming. I took the fireproof box down from the shelf. I removed everything from it. Documents, the cash envelope, the Ireland folder. I replaced them with a color-copied version of my social security card that Ellen had made on plain paper, 2 old Discover card statements with the account numbers scratched out, and an envelope that appeared to be full of cash, but was actually 43 ones with a folded sticky note on top that said, "Lois, reminder. Call Gerald this week." Real contents went into a locked steel document safe I'd ordered online to the address of my tenant in Dayton, the teacher, who held it for me until I could drive out and retrieve it a week later. Back on the shelf. Box. Unlocked, as always. Then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. It was a Thursday night, late June. Derek was at a conference in Cincinnati. The kids were asleep. Sylvia had gone to bed around 10, or I thought she had. I was lying on my side in the dark when I heard her. She was better at it by now. Quieter. But I'd spent 2 months listening for exactly this. The soft drag of the closet door. The specific sound of the fireproof box being lifted and set on the shelf edge. The clasp. I kept my breathing slow. Even the rustle of papers. A long pause. The crinkle of the envelope being opened. Another pause, longer this time. I could almost feel her confusion from across the room. The wrong numbers on the card. The ones instead of hundreds. The strange sticky note. Then I turned on the lamp. She froze with her back to me. The envelope in her hand. The papers spread on the shelf. She turned slowly. The look on her face moved through several things in quick succession. Shock. Then a flash of something calculating. Then something she settled on, which was wounded dignity. Aunt Lois, she said my name like an explanation. Put it down, I said. I was just. You were in my room at 11:30 at night going through my personal documents. My voice was completely level. Put it down and sit down. She put the envelope down. She did not sit. I was worried, she said. You've been so private lately. I thought you might be having financial problems and not telling us. I just wanted to make sure you changed my life insurance beneficiary, I said. The silence after that was total. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the door as if measuring the distance. The form was filed 9 months ago, I said. I spoke to Ellen on Monday. She flagged it. That signature is not mine. Sylvia's jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. That's all right, I said. You don't have to. Ellen already filed a dispute with the insurance company. And I've documented everything else as well. The glasses, the cardigan, the cash you took in March and partially replaced in April. I kept my voice as mild as if I were discussing the weather forecast. 4 pages of it. Her expression changed then. The wounded dignity dropped. What replaced it was harder, colder. You've been building a case, she said. It was almost admiring. Almost. I've been protecting myself, I said, which is what I should have started doing in March. You don't have any proof of anything real. I reached under my pillow and slid out a manila envelope. Not dramatically, just calmly, the way you hand someone a grocery receipt. These are printed copies of the insurance form with my disputed signature flagged by a handwriting comparison. Bank statements showing withdrawals I didn't make from the joint household account I briefly had access to before I removed myself from it. And a letter from Ellen outlining the legal exposure for insurance fraud and elder financial abuse in the state of Ohio. I watched her read the word elder financial abuse and I watched what that did to her face. That's a class 4 felony here, I said. Ellen explained it very thoroughly. Sylvia set the papers down. Her hands were not quite steady. You would really do that? To family? I looked at her for a long time. This girl I'd watched grow up, who'd sat in my kitchen doing homework on winter afternoons, who'd called me when her mother, my sister Renata, died and said you're all I have left and meant it, I'd thought. I believed her, I think. Even now part of me wanted to. You came into my room at night to steal from me, I said quietly. You tried to change documents to redirect my estate. You stood in front of me and suggested my memory was failing so I'd doubt my own mind. You did all of that to family. I paused. I'm just the one responding to it. She didn't cry. I'll give her that. She was angry, and the anger was real. She grabbed the papers and went down the hall, and I heard her bedroom door close with exaggerated quiet. The kind of quiet that's louder than slamming. I sat on the edge of my bed. My hands were folded in my lap. My heart was moving too fast, but it was moving just fine. I slept better that night than I had in months. I was packed and gone before the kids got up for school. I didn't leave a dramatic note. I left a plain one on the kitchen counter. Derek, please call me when you have a moment. There are some things I need to tell you. I've gone to stay with Gerald for a while. Lois. I drove to the Comfort Inn off I-70, checked in, ordered room service soup and a club sandwich, and watched an old episode of Jeopardy! I knew most of the answers. It felt like reclaiming something. Gerald, my brother in Clearwater, flew up 2 weeks later after I'd walked him through everything by phone. He was furious in the quiet way of someone who needs a few days to process before they speak. He called Derek himself, which I hadn't asked him to do but was grateful for. Derek, apparently, had not known about the insurance form. His shock was genuine, according to Gerald. His marriage would handle that revelation in its own time and in its own way. That wasn't mine to manage. Alan filed the formal dispute on the insurance beneficiary designation. The company launched an internal review. In October, 4 months after I left that house, I received a letter confirming the change had been reversed. The policy reverted to Gerald as primary beneficiary. The criminal piece was something I sat with for a long time. Elder financial abuse is a real charge with real consequences. And Sylvia had 2 children and a marriage already strained to its limit. I consulted Ellen twice about it. I thought about my sister Renata, who would have been mortified and heartbroken. I thought about Marcus and Lily, who'd done nothing wrong. In the end, I filed a report with the Ohio Attorney General's Elder Abuse Unit, not to send Sylvia to prison, but because Ellen told me clearly that these things need to be on record. Whether they pursue it further is their decision, not mine. I've said what I know. The documentation is real. What happens next belongs to a process larger than my feelings about it. What I know is this: I didn't look away from what was happening. I didn't talk myself out of it. And I didn't wait for someone to believe me before I started protecting myself. My house in Dayton was mine again the following January when the lease ended and my tenants moved into a place of their own. I came back in February, in the dead of cold, and walked through each room the way you do when you've been gone long enough that your own house feels slightly foreign. The kitchen was clean. The floors were good. The back window that had always let in a draft had been weather-stripped. The young teacher had done it himself and left a note apologizing for not asking first, which made me smile for a long time. I put the kettle on. I stood at the window and watched the snow come down in the backyard, slow and indifferent, the way Ohio snow does in February. The silver maple by the fence was bare but enormous, the way it always was in winter, and I knew by April it would be completely different. I started writing again that spring. Not about any of this, not at first. I started with small things. A description of my kitchen in the morning light. A memory of my first year teaching. A boy named Terrence who couldn't read past a 2nd grade level when I got him and was reading Hatchet by March. An afternoon in 1987, when my sister Renata and I drove to Put-in-Bay on a whim and ate perch sandwiches on a dock and stayed until the ferry nearly left without us. The writing about Sylvia came later when I was ready, not for anyone else, just for me, so that I had said it clearly, in my own words, without apology and without bitterness. The facts, the sequence, what I noticed and when, what I did about it. The way writing things down has always been how I make sense of them. I signed up for a memoir writing group at the library on Thursday afternoons. 12 people around a folding table. Most of them older, a few younger, all of them carrying something they were trying to find language for. I brought pages sometimes. Other times I just listened. There was a woman named Harriet, 71, former postal worker, voice like a radio announcer, who wrote about her first marriage with a precision and a humor that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. There was a man named Ellis who was trying to write about his son and could never quite finish the pages before he ran out of road. I brought coffee cake on alternate weeks and became known for it, which is a small and excellent thing to be known for it. Sylvia sent a text in March. Not an apology exactly, more of a gesture toward one. I hope you're doing well, Aunt Lois. The kids ask about you. I sat with the phone in my hand for a while. I thought about what to say. I thought about Renata. I thought about the fact that some debts cannot be settled with a text message, and some distances cannot be crossed without someone actually doing the work of crossing them. I wrote back, "I'm well. I hope the kids are well. If you'd like to talk one day, you know how to reach me." I put the phone down and went back to my writing. The window was open. The maple was in full leaf by then, enormous and very green, and the light coming through it made the whole kitchen feel like the inside of something alive. There is a particular freedom that comes not from escaping hard things, but from handling them and staying standing. I didn't know that in my 30s. I was still learning it in my 50s. At 63, lying in a dark bedroom waiting for the sound of a cask being opened, I finally understood it completely. I handled it. I stayed standing. That's the whole story. People ask me sometimes if I feel guilty. Not about what I did, about waiting so long to do it. Honestly, I've sat with that question more than I expected to. Here's what I've come to understand. The delay wasn't weakness. It was the last remnant of a belief I'd carried most of my life, which is that people who love you will eventually correct themselves if you just give them enough time and enough grace. That belief kept me writing notes in a green spiral notebook instead of picking up the phone and calling Ellen. It kept me folding laundry and making soup and telling myself I was probably misreading things. I wasn't misreading anything. I knew that. But knowing something and being willing to act on it are two very different muscles, and one of mine had gotten soft from years of not needing it. What Sylvia did was calculated. I want to be clear about that because there's a version of this story where she's just a struggling woman who made bad choices under financial pressure, and I don't think that's honest. She forged a signature on an insurance document. She watched me closely enough to understand which doubts to plant in my own mind. Memory issues, little confusions, have you talked to your doctor? And she planted them with precision. That takes a certain intelligence, and intelligence directed at harm is still harm. The fact that she was family made it more sophisticated, not less. She knew exactly which loyalties to lean on to keep me from acting. What I did. The fake documents, the replaced cash, lying still in the dark waiting. None of that came from anger. It came from finally respecting my own observations. Every time I'd notice something wrong and talk myself out of it, I taught myself that my perception wasn't reliable. The notebook was how I stopped doing that. I wrote down what I saw, and then I read it back, and it said clearly, "This is real, and it is escalating, and you are the only one who is going to stop it." There's something that happens when you stop waiting for circumstances to fix themselves. A kind of clarity. Not confidence exactly. I was scared truthfully that whole night in the dark. But a steadiness. I knew what I had done and why, and I knew what I was going to say, and I said it without raising my voice. That's not nothing. For a woman who spent 30 years managing other people's feelings to keep a room calm, saying what was true without softening it first felt like finally speaking my own language. The outcome for Sylvia is hers to carry. I filed the report because Ellen said it needed to be on record, and she was right. What happens from there isn't mine to control, and I've made my peace with that. Marcus and Lily are 9 and 6. They didn't choose any of this. I think about them sometimes. Hope they're being raised to understand that the people who trust you are not resources to be managed. That's not a small thing to learn. Most people learn it the hard way. My kitchen in Dayton gets good morning light. The maple is putting out new growth. I finished 12 pages at the library last Thursday, and Harriet said the voice was strong, which is the best compliment I know how to receive. I'm still here. I handled what needed handling, and I stayed standing, and most mornings that feels like exactly enough.